Thank you, Joanne, for the introduction. It's actually not an easy job to convene a session because you really need to have good time management skills, especially when there are two presenters. So, good afternoon. Welcome to the session. As a librarian whose job is to provide access services and the coordinator of library's digital media experience lab, we've been exploring ways library access and services can be reimagined through the 21st century lens. And we are delighted that you are here today to hear what we've been up to. For those who haven't heard of Ryerson, Ryerson University is located in downtown Toronto, Ontario. It's one of Canada's leaders in innovative career-based education and entrepreneurship. Pictured here is the Ryerson's new Student Learning Center, the new 21st Century Library, which was opened in February last year. Recently awarded one of the 7 most beautiful new libraries in North America by the American Library Association and the American Institute of Architects. Within the SLC, what you will find has become one of the major attractions is the library's Digital Media Experience Lab, the DME, a makerspace. DME has a mission to support teaching, innovation, and experiential learning, while allowing students to get their hands-on experience on emerging and technological tools. In the past year, DME has gained a lot of interest from a variety of groups, including Toronto's City TV. Our chief librarian and head of library information technology were interviewed by the Breakfast television show. Matt Galloway, alongside the SLC, was featured in the premiere episode of Disrupting Design show hosted by CBC. DME has also collaborated with the TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival's digital play space, to create a Library of LittleBits exhibition. Last year, in the same Access conference, which took place in Toronto, Namir was being introduced as the man who was given the mission impossible to run the lab. Now it's been over a year, and he's proven that it's mission possible. So I'll pass it to Namir, who will talk about it in details.
It's still an impossible mission. It's always going to stay that way. So my name is Namir. As was mentioned before, I have an archaeology, anthropology background, as well as computer animation. So of course I work at a library. And I want to start with a story, and I promise this is relevant. So I landed last night, and I've never been to Fredericton before. And so, like any time a plane lands, the seatbelt light goes off, and everybody gets up into the middle aisle, and you're like, it's all crowded. And when I say everybody, I mean just me. And somebody else who was clearly also from Toronto. So we're looking at each other and we're like, what's going on? Are these people moving on? They're going on to Halifax or something? No. The doors opened to the plane, and everybody started to get up in an orderly, organized fashion. So row 1, they stood up, they gathered all their stuff, and they left. Row 2, row 3, row 4. And they were very polite, they were very organized, they were very pleasant, and I was like, I've landed in Canadian paradise. So I'm still trying to figure out, this stuck with me for some reason, and I'm still trying to figure out why, and my hope is that at the end of my portion of the talk, I'll figure it out. I think there's something there. So as Weina was mentioning, we did this talk last year about the DME lab. We had just opened, we had a lot of buzz. We were kind of riding on peak hype, if that makes any sense. And I remember thinking, this is going to be the easiest job in the world. All I need to do is just put out cool technology, and students are going to come in, and they're just going to have a great time. I just need to sit back and put my feet up, and I can do this for years. How wrong was I? So we went from this, which is a full lab, lots of students during the summer, to basically this. So what happened? Well, after months of being new, we weren't new anymore. We were kind of old hat, and we forgot kind of the most important thing about being part of a library. And again, I'm not a librarian, so for me this is kind of a bit of a learning process, right? In order to be part of a library, you need to offer services, you need to have value. So we had forgotten that. So we panicked and we're like, oh my God, we have to actually do stuff now. So we implemented a number of services. Which kind of services? We do workshops, tutorials, curriculum support. Weina is going to be talking about technology lending. I'm going to talk about some of the workshops that we do, how we approach tutorials, but I'm also going to be talking about some of our projects that are directly, we think, directly related to access, specifically access to technology. So, like most spaces like ours, makerspaces, kind of fab labs, we have 3D printers. Initially, when we had the 3D printers out and we were using them, basically what we would do is students would come in, they would say, I want to print this. And we would say, okay, great, we'll take care of the whole thing for you. We'll grab the file, we'll print it off, and we'll leave it. We became a service, and that's not where we wanted to sit. We didn't want to do that. That was kind of one of the key components that we were missing. We were missing the reflection part of it. We were missing why students had to 3D print, why it was interesting, why it was an important thing. One of the things that we also realized was it's not 3D printing really, it's 3D design. And so once we started thinking about this, we developed a couple of rules. The premier rule is no cell phone cases. We don't allow cell phone cases. Can anybody tell me why? Any idea why we don't do that? So we don't allow 3D printed cell phone cases.
Cheap and easy to find.
They are cheap and easy to find, exactly. So one of the first lessons we teach about 3D printing is that 3D printing has a place. It has a place in what you're doing, and it's not always the most appropriate thing to use, right? So if you're printing a cell phone case, just go down to the mall. It's cheaper. You're not spending a ton of hours, and frankly, 3D printed cell phone cases kind of suck, right? You want rubber, right? You want it to last. So we really emphasize that point. Think about what it is that you're 3D printing. In terms of workshops, we've started to kind of hit all the things that most of our colleagues that have been doing this stuff already have already hit. So we do physical computing, we use Arduinos a lot, we use LittleBits, Makeys. We also do a quadcopter building workshop where we teach students how to actually 3D print the parts and assemble the parts to build their own quadcopter. I don't have any pictures of it flying or working, mainly because of plausible deniability. But they work, and they're great. So we show students how to do it because we want to, somebody mentioned demystifying technology. I think that's really appropriate, and this is a really good way of doing it. It doesn't have to work, they just have to build it. So we do the same thing with virtual reality and augmented reality. Students can still come in and try the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift, but we want them to do something with it. So we provide tutorials and workshops around that. Just in general, we do about, on average, about 100 one-on-one tutorials about all of those topics a month. So we know that demand exists, and we're starting to fill that niche. So what have we learned in the past year? Well, I've kind of already said it. Cool technology will only take you so far. It turns out it takes you 4 months. That's about it. And then afterwards, you have to actually start doing something. So we got really excited once we started implementing programming. We're like, this is amazing. Let's start doing more of this. Let's give them all the access that we possibly can. And then we realized that was completely unrealistic. So we said, okay, we'll give them slightly more access. So we're doing that in a few ways. Some of the projects that we're working on are we're making our 3D printers mobile with minimal supervision. We're putting together sensor-based data gathering kits for students because we want them to be able to go, if they're not computer engineers or computer scientists, we want them to go out into the environment and actually still be able to gather useful data sets from around them. So I'll talk about the 3D printers being mobile first. I've got a little video about how it works. It's not going to look like much, but I'll play it anyway. But I'll just want to explain a little bit of the impetus around this or why we're doing it. If you've been in our space, you'll know that we're set up kind of like a fishbowl. So one of our walls is literally glass. So if you don't identify with being a fish, you're not going to want to go into the fishbowl, right? So all the technology in that room has a barrier. So our solution was to take that technology and get it out of the fishbowl, get it outside of the actual DME and into the rest of the library. That has the added benefit of strengthening our tie with the rest of Ryerson's library. But if you've worked with 3D printers, you know that immediately some of you are thinking, well, that's crazy. That's not going to work. And so how do we make it work? Well, the first step is to do some sort of access control. 3D printers are really, really messy. If you do training with students on how to actually use a 3D printer, they need to be the only ones that can use that 3D printer. So we have a staff member who's also a student that designed a RFID access system for our 3D printers. And so I'm just going to play it now. What I'm going to ask you to do is, see where the little hand, the pointer is? Right here? Oh, there. So I'm going to play it. Watch that fan. See, it's not spinning. It's now spinning. And now pretty soon, it's going to stop spinning. And there. Okay. So what just happened was the machine is inoperable without that RFID card. This isn't our idea. We actually got it from Hackaday. Hackaday is a great place to go if you need ideas for actual physical computing projects. And it's a Currente Pass, open access. So they had the same problem where they needed their lab equipment to be controlled somehow. So we took what they had done and kind of changed it for our needs. So if you kind of want to know the nuts and bolts of it, what's happening is there's a relay system attached to a Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi is connected to the internet and an RFID system. We could have used a smaller Arduino, but we wanted to accommodate scaling up. So right now, the Raspberry Pi also holds a flat file a database for access control. So anybody that we've given permission to use this particular printer is on that flat file. And let me go to the next slide. How does this work here? There we go. So again, access control is cross-referenced with a list that we put together, and it's really based on a set of certifications. So a student would need to go through kind of training, safety training, and they'd have to pass a test. Again, we're not the first ones that have done this. Many other libraries have already implemented this. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Ryerson Library, Mad Lab. They did this years and years ago, so they're kind of our inspiration for it, but it makes complete sense. So this is my flowchart of how this kind of works, or potentially could work once it's taken outside of the lab. Because it's not monitored anymore, right? We don't have staff there other than library staff that can kind of look at it or make sure that it's actually working properly. One of the things that we have yet to implement is a box of some kind with a door and a latch attached to that access control system. So the idea would be that a user from any computer at Ryerson could print from that computer to a specific 3D printer if they have that access control card. And after the print is done, they would go to the printer, pop in the access control card, the RFID system would cross-reference that list, make sure they're on it, and then it would pop the door open. There's a couple of practical things where if you've ever, who has actually used a 3D printer? Okay, great. So one of the problems with 3D printers is that you can't, it's really difficult sometimes to get the print off the bed. It's kind of a pain. But we kind of by accident discovered a material, it's called PETG, that seems to just pop off, which is really, really nice. So we're gonna try that. And if that works, that means that when you put the card in and the door opens up, that print is just ready to grab. So for us, that's really important because it means that this type of technology and 3D printers can become distributed, right? It can become more accessible to more students. And those silos that we keep talking about, some of those can come down. Our next project is data gathering. We use something called an ESP8266. Has anybody heard of that? Okay. So it's like a really, really tiny Arduino. So it's basically a really small computer that's internet connected. It's about this big. So it's about the size of like a loonie. But here's the great part. It's $5. You can buy one of those things for $5, and it's essentially like getting an Arduino that you can connect to the internet. There's a bunch of things that you need to kind of do around it to get it to work. That's what all that other stuff around. So the ESP is just that black board right there. The rest of it is stuff that we have added so that students can program it using the Arduino IDE. And it's great that it's Arduino compatible because it means that you can use a language that you're already kind of interested in and have used already to do this. So why are we doing this? For us, it's about giving students the ability to do something that they haven't been able to do before. So if you're an interior design student or if you're somebody from the humanities, you have access to this. You can gather, if you're interior design, you can start gathering data from a room, like temperature data. So this is temperature and humidity data gathered with an ESP over the course of summer. The building basically has an AI, so essentially it's flatlined, it's all the same, it's basically the same number. Anything that's like an error is usually our fault, like somebody knocked over the ESP and it just kind of got hot. But this is an example of what students can do with it. So we want to give them the ability to gather their own data. So I want to bring it back to that initial story because I think I may have figured out how it ties. The DME initially was like me standing up in the middle of the aisle. We're really excited, we really wanted to get off the plane, but we just couldn't. The library is sort of everybody else. They know the deal, right? They've done this before. They know how to get off the plane in an organized, systematic, efficient way. So we should be taking advantage of that. The library has learned a ton of lessons that we're just starting to catch up with. So I think for me, that's what access in the 21st century means. It's not necessarily a reimagining, it's expanding. It's expanding already available library values to other technologies. So that's where I'm going to end it. I'm going to hand it back over to Weina, who's actually going to talk about that a little bit more.
So when I returned to work in March after 1 year maternity leave, my colleagues Fangming and Namir approached me and asked whether I would be interested in some DME projects. Knowing the fact that the DME has become one of the most innovative places in campus, of course I jumped up and I said yes. I also asked myself, what is a makerspace? Why library needs a makerspace? How can it be integrated to other library programs and services, be embraced by librarians and library staff in their support to university? With a series of questions, I started the exploration as a librarian. Where I got my inspiration, I was lucky enough to send my 18-month-old daughter to the Montessori school, where she learned a lot of independence so that I could focus on my job. Having a toddler in the house has also inspired me to rethink about the value and the importance of creating a meaningful learning environment for continuous lifelong learning and making learning accessible. During the school orientation, the teacher introduced the mission of Montessori as it promotes active, self-directed learning. They encourage students to initiate the learning experience themselves, learn by doing, and devote their love for learning, and also learning it together. That sounds just like a makerspace, and it's not that hard for me to make the connection with the library, because the library is a place that is providing accesses to all the collaborative learning experiences. According to EDUCAUSE, a library makerspace is a physical location where people gather to share resources and knowledge, work on projects, network, and build. Library was listed as one of the ideal places to provide such a makerspace. In 2015, the American Research Library Association conducted the survey of its member libraries. Out of the 64 libraries responded, makerspace seems to be of significant interest, and a majority of them have been engaged in some level of maker activities. A number of respondents emphasized that the core competitive advantage of the library is not in providing hardware or simply physical space, but in creating a learning environment that combines services, space, and expertise to foster individual and collaborative investigation, interrogation, and learning through doing. The library's DME lab is located on the third floor of the new SLC, which is physically separated from where the major library services are. Although it's running by the library, it may not seem so obvious that anyone can just walk in and do a 3D printer for free. In order to naturally attract more users to the lab from a diversity of groups, 3 librarians, Trina, Sally, and May, have created this perfect opportunity for people who may be shy or intimidated to be able to hang out in the lab. They are running a weekly knitting group called Knit Happens. They meet every Tuesday morning and discuss learning knitting skills together. And that's not it. The stuff they are knitting will eventually be turned into something high-tech called wearable computing. So they are putting some sensors like Arduino, microcontrollers in the stuff they are knitting. Trina is actually over there. She will be showing the amazing stuff tomorrow afternoon, so don't miss that. Going back to history, that's kind of where library makerspaces have started. In 1873, a century ago, the Gowanda Free Library from New York started out as the Gowanda Ladies Society, social society, where a group of local women would meet in the library to socialize, quilt, knit, sew, and discuss books they have read. The knitting group is kind of an experience to connect the past, the present, and the future as technology advances. As part of the exploration, I also observed one of the workshops DME is offering called Introduction to Physical Computing. Two DME staff, they are also students from Ryerson, Aaron and Holly. They explained the physical computing in a very simple, non-technical, easy to understand way, followed by a hands-on workshop. In the hands-on part, students were asked to follow some instructions and put together an Arduino kit and connect that to a program called Blink. Being a participant and a non-engineering student myself in the classroom, I couldn't believe that I was able to build an Arduino kit that blinks an LED light all within 1 hour. This is amazing because it leads to so many opportunities and so many possibilities what you can do with it. I can see why students are excited about it. Let's look at some real-life applications of what you can do with an Arduino kit. The first picture shows a Twitter-enabled coffee pot. You can tweet at your coffee pot when you are out and come home to a fresh brew. How nice. The second picture shows an auto-lacing shoe. All you need to do is step in the shoe, and it will detect your foot pressure and tightens the shoelaces for you. Of course, Halloween is coming. You can even set up a flame-throwing lantern from your pumpkin and set fire. That's not recommended. As Namir said, you only 5 minutes for the Arduino kit, and you can build so many possibilities. That's not it. To make technology and experience even more accessible, the DME staff have put together a loanable Arduino project kit that is students can borrow and use it outside of the library. As you can see in this little box, and you can download so many programs from internet and connect it to this kit. Similar to the Arduino equipment, DME has a large inventory of technology purposed for student use. In many cases, these students want to use outside of the lab, the library. The initial DME lending program started in summer 2015 using a Google form that records student information and checkout information. The form was adequate in the summer, but it became unsustainable in the fall as the demands went up. There was also a situation that really clinched for the needs for our trained service experts. One day, a student borrowed an expensive camera and lost it the next day in a campus event. And then the DME staff were in the situation that you have to pay how much bucks, which is significant. Given the collegial environment that the DME is offering to the students, it's kind of tough for them to start a conversation like that. And also the accountability piece of lending equipment is essential. Students need to see the item has been billed to their account, that they are responsible. On the other hand, our circulation customer service desk staff have vast experience dealing with paying down fines, fees in a respective manner, and also help students de-escalate the crisis and work with them to find the best solution. so that the DME staff could focus on their passion, their core business, which is a makerspace, digital fabrication lab, technology lender, digital media production facility. So the proposed solution was for DME to work with the borrowing and lending services, have all the items cataloging in the Millennium library system, and all the checkout transactions processed at the circulation desk. Currently, there are 17 items for loan, including camera kits, tripods, GoPro, mail armband, and virtual reality Oculus Rift. I thought it would be interesting to look at some stats because we have the impression that the engineering students would take advantage of the makerspace more than other departments. Yes, they are, but it's nice to see there are actually students from all over campus that come to the lab and they signed a technology lending agreement form and start borrowing, including students from fashion, arts, contemporary studies, social work, business, etc. And the program has been going very well since April. There have been over 240 checkouts in the last few months, and the most popular ones were the camera kits. There are many benefits to setting up a technology lending program. Well, the major goal is to make digital tools available for our students. It's obvious that the collaboration with the shared expertise is making the program more sustainable and more consistent. In my own experience, working many years with the circulation staff, this program really empowers them and enables them to provide a service that would meet the needs for the 21st century users. We've collected some comments from students and some very positive feedback. And one student mentioned that students are overjoyed to know that the DME equipment are available to them, especially if they just wanted to test the equipment before purchasing or need high quality footage for a project. It's also exciting to explore equipment which is not easily acquired and expensive. So we are providing access to students the tools they would otherwise not be so hard to access. What next? Okay, feel free to add to this. And so we plan to expand the technology lending program. So Namir has been working on putting more stuff available for loan to expand the variety of the equipment. For example, adding robot kits, drawing tables, lighting equipment for photography, equipment for sound recording, etc. And they also plan to create more workshops on the equipment. I'd like to point out one of the uniqueness of the workshops DME staff have developed was that normally they have a guest speaker, let's say, to talk about a topic, and then immediately followed by the talk, they have a hands-on workshop so that the students can actually experiment with the technology and do some hands-ons. That's Namir's invention, I think. So we would have more project kits and more collaboration with the borrowing and lending services. And I see we're also investigating whether this can be something public service staff can carry on onwards. There's also a group of us have been looking at working for a research project to investigate the library as a collaboratory. And the topic is how library and faculty collaboration through makerspaces can lead to technology in enhanced teaching and learning. So because we really wanted to leverage academic makerspaces in a higher education context and support faculty. Okay, thank you. And any questions? Okay.
Are there any questions? Yeah.
I can just yell. Just one quick question. Is the services available to the public, or is it just for Ryerson?
Just Ryerson students for now, yeah.
Does the Toronto Public Library, do they offer similar?
They also have similar programs for 3D printing. I think they charge a small fee, right? We are free, yeah.
Most of our 3D printing is, we require students to manage that process themselves. At the Toronto Public Library, it's really, you give your print to staff there and they print it out for you. It makes more sense because they can't afford to have machines go down. Whereas for us, when they go down, we treat it as a learning process, and we don't have the staff to actually manage everybody's prints, so students need to manage their own.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah. Thanks for sharing your experiences. I'm wondering if you could expand upon what your needs assessment process looked like for determining what equipment and programming you would put in the lab to make sure it wasn't duplicating effort, and did you consult with faculty and students?
Would you like to comment?
Maybe. Nope, I'm good. That's a really good question. Our needs assessment was intuition. And it was largely because when the building opened, we opened, and we didn't have a ton of ramp-up time. So the good thing is what's happening now is there is a campus-wide inventory of equipment, which we're a part of. So we're now starting to kind of get caught up on what's around. But before, it was essentially going around to different groups on campus and saying, do you guys have a virtual reality? I have virtual reality. Do you guys have 3D printing? Oh, we do too, blah, blah, blah. And just doing it that way. So it was fairly ad hoc.
Other questions? Back.
I don't need a microphone. I feel like you said something that you're using the library's ILS to circulate your hits.
Mm-hmm.
Are they discoverable in there as well?
Yes, yeah. Actually, I didn't introduce that the library has a very successful laptop loan program. We have been running for many years, so the infrastructure is there. The loan period, loan rules, and all the fines, the policy procedures are there. They are all searchable from OPAC. Yeah, it displays the next availability too. Yeah, how many are available. So it's discoverable. That's one of the benefits of having circulation dealing with this.
Any more questions? We have a couple of minutes. Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's an obstacle course.
Hi, thanks so much for your presentation. I launched a makerspace at the Moncton Public Library, so I really understand where you're coming from. What you envision it's going to be is not at all what it ends up being in the end. I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
I was wondering who provides the workshops? Is it faculty, or do you partner with people from the community? And then I was wondering if you could talk a bit about recommendations maybe for 3D printers. We have a MakerBot, and we've had a lot of problems with it. So if you have any advice or anything like that, that'd be awesome.
Sure.
And then that PET-G material, I'd be interested in hearing. Was it PET-G or something?
It is PET-G.
PET-G, yeah. Thanks.
So I'll address that in, I guess, reverse order, because that's how my brain works. PET-G is recycled filament. So it's basically the same material as what goes into plastic water bottles. The G is for glycol, so it keeps it kind of together nicely. But we're running experiments on it now, and it's working amazingly well. So you bought a MakerBot.
Yeah.
What version of MakerBot did you buy?
It's a 5th generation.
Yeah.
I know like how an extruder works now, taking apart so many
Yeah.
different ways to unclog it and stuff, but just the fact that we had so many problems with reclogging pretty much right from the beginning.
Yeah. So we have a lot of printer bots, and we bought them because they're reliable, and we have a TAS. We stayed away from MakerBots just because we were hearing a lot of stories of how the 5th gen MakerBots their extruders weren't that great. The like the smart extruders that weren't actually all that smart. But I think the next version is actually pretty good. So you.
The extruder plus is a little bit better.
Yeah. But I would stay away. In terms of MakerBots, the best MakerBot is the Replicator 2. They're really, really solid, and people are still buying them. But we buy printer bots because they're cheap, they're really easy to fix, and when we're teaching, it's not a black box. Like, you can see all the parts moving around and working. So that's why that kind of works for us. And your last question is who do we get to do the workshops? So we actually don't get a lot of faculty to do the workshops for us because, frankly, they're busy, like they're teaching. So we get students who we kind of consider to be pretty good in their field. So, like a lot of third years are really good at Photoshop, right? So, and because they've had a couple of years of using it, some high school as well. So we take advantage of that. We pay them a small honorarium, and then they do a workshop. And we also use our staff, our student staff. And we have started to reach out to community members who we consider experts. When we do that, we sort of frame it as a talk as opposed to a hands-on workshop. So that's who we use.
I think we're pretty much out of time. I'd like to thank you both very much. It's been a very interesting talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.